So let's talk about shooting video with the Samsung Galaxy S26 Ultra. So we're going to look at the Blackmagic camera app as well as shooting with the native app. And we've also got this new APV high quality video codec, which Samsung has implemented with their own log profile to rival the iPhone's ProRes, ProRes RAW and Apple Log 1 and 2. The cameras on the Galaxy S26 Ultra are pretty similar to the 25 Ultra, but there have been some changes. For the main camera, we now have a wider f1.4 aperture compared to the S25 Ultra's f1.7 aperture, which is going to let in about 47% more light. The 5x telephoto now has a f2.9 aperture, which compares to the previous version's f3.4 aperture, and that's going to let in about 37% more light. So this extra aperture size should be good for low light situations, as well as making your depth of field a little bit shallower. In other words, you're going to get hopefully blurrier backgrounds. On the other hand, a camera that lets in more light might also mean that you need stronger ND filters if you're aiming for the 180-degree shutter, which is, recommended for shooting cinematic looking video. Another change, perhaps seen as a downgrade, the 3x telephoto sensor is actually slightly smaller on the S26 Ultra compared to the previous model. In the native camera UI, you now get an HDR button, which is going to be on by default. And with this on, you will be shooting HDR10 plus video, which is pretty similar to Apple's Dolby Vision. And just like Apple's Dolby Vision, this format isn't always compatible with every platform and every monitor. So if you don't want to shoot HDR10+, then just tap this to disable it. And you can also go into settings and switch it off completely. Tap the 4 dots, tap the cog, tap video format, then toggle off HDR. Back in the camera UI, the HDR button is now gone. And if you want to enable log and APV recording, so you can actually do that in the same place. And then back in the main UI, you will now get an APV button and you can tap that to enable it. And you're going to see that it also says log because I've selected log. You can choose between log or HDR. You can't shoot Rec 709 with APV. And beside the button, you're going to get this amount of video that you can record in this format using the current settings. So unlike iPhones and ProRes, the Samsung S26 Ultra does not restrict you to recording to an external drive like iPhones do. If you want to record at high frame rates or if you want to record ProRes RAW, you have to attach an external drive. With the Samsung S26 Ultra, you do not have to do that, although it is recommended that you do so, but at least you have the choice if you don't want to. So you can shoot up to 8K APV log at the highest quality direct to your internal storage if you want to. And like I say, it is recommended that you attach an SSD, a fast one, especially if you're going to record more than a few minutes of footage. So I've got about 400 gigabytes storage free on this phone, and you can see that at 8K APV 30 frames per second, it's saying I can record about 5 minutes of footage. And so that doesn't mean that 5 minutes of 8K APV 30 frames per second is going to come to 400 gigabytes. What it means is that that's basically how much space Samsung is giving me. So a 5-second clip of 8K APV 30 frames per second is going to come out at around 2 gigabytes. So that's pretty hefty. And 5 seconds of 4K APV 30 frames per second comes out at about half a gigabyte. So that's, a quarter of the size. And for that reason, of course, you are better off with an external SSD. And if you want to record 8K APV, you're going to need an SSD with a minimum write speed of 400 megabytes per second. As well, you're also going to need support for up to 4.5 watts of power draw if you want to record high frame rate or 8K APV. And that's because when you plug an SSD into your phone, the phone supplies power to the drive through the USB-C port. And some older or cheaper SSDs are going to draw more power than the port can actually reliably supply. And that can cause the drive to disconnect or to fail mid-recording. So make sure that your SSD is up to it. And all this means is that your SSD needs to operate within a 4.5 watt power budget. And most modern portable SSDs comfortably handle that. So for my shots, I actually use this one, the Afro P20, and this has read and write speeds up to 1000 megabytes per second. So that's, plenty fast enough, and you can just plug it directly into your phone. And it comes with these little adapters as well, so you can have it placed against the back of the phone instead of sticking out the side. And I'll put a link in the description if you're interested in that. But I do think it's good to have the option to record internally. Maybe you just want a few minutes of footage and you don't want to mess about with an SSD. While I was recording with the external SSD, I did come across a bit of an issue. When I first connected the drive, everything worked perfectly. The camera app detected it, switched to external recording, and I was getting really nice 8K APV footage straight to the SSD. Happy days. A couple of days later, so I connect the drive again. The Samsung native camera app gives you the prompt telling you to switch to external storage. So I tap change, but I didn't get this USB-C indicator in the top corner. You can see here, it's just nothing's changing. So if you don't get that USB-C indicator in the top corner, then you know that you're not recording to the USB-C. And all it does is just record internally instead, even though you've clicked the change. And if you look at the settings, it says that you've switched to external recording. But when I tried the Blackmagic camera app, I was able to route to the SSD no problem and record APV video. Didn't have an issue. It's just that when I was trying to use the native camera app, it just wouldn't recognize it. And so I couldn't record video to this external drive. And I tried everything. I tried reformatting the drive, clearing the camera cache, checking USB settings. I tried even some secret codes that are supposed to fix it that didn't work. All kinds of stuff. And none of it worked. But eventually I found this fix, which has worked for me so far. Although it is a bit extreme. What you need to do is go to settings, apps, and camera. So this is like the native Samsung camera app, storage, and then you just want to clear cache and data. So first of all, I tried clearing cache, didn't solve the problem. But once I cleared cache and data, then basically you're like factory resetting your camera app on your phone, and it will go through the little tutorial stuff again. But if you are having this issue, then this is probably going to get you back up and running. But while I was trying to fix the SSD not being recognized, one thing that I did do was to use the Samsung to format the SSD. And that actually fixed the problem, or it fixed the first problem, but then it created another problem because now my MacBook wouldn't recognize the SSD. Well, apparently when you format a drive on a Samsung phone, it uses a format that a MacBook doesn't like. So to fix this, I had to move all the APV footage from the SSD onto the Samsung internal storage and then reformat the SSD using my Mac and the disk utility. So set it to exFAT with the scheme set to GUID partition map. And after that, the SSD is now recognized by both my Mac and my Samsung 26 Ultra. So if you don't know what APV is, it stands for Advanced Professional Video, and it's an open source codec developed by Samsung, and the S26 Ultra is the first phone in the world to support it. So the idea behind APV is to give you a codec that holds up all the way through your workflow, from recording through editing to final export. And it records visually lossless video with 4:2:2 color, which means you're retaining significantly more color information than standard H.265. And because it's intra-frame, meaning each frame is encoded independently, it's not going to fall apart when you re-encode or grade the footage. And to my eyes, the footage you get is really nice and clean, and it's perfect for color work, allowing you to add your own taste and style to your footage. When you edit APV footage, you're going to need compatible software. So here I'm using DaVinci Resolve, which is obviously the best for color grading, but there is a bit of a steep learning curve. On the other hand, LumaFusion also supports APV, but Final Cut Pro and Adobe Premiere Pro do not yet support this codec. And as well, when you open a folder containing an APV file, so here, this is on my MacBook, you can see that there's no thumbnail and you can't play this in QuickTime, for example. So you are going to need specific software to play this, and obviously you can play it in your phone, in your Samsung S26 Ultra, no problem. Now in the regular video app, the Samsung S26 Ultra restricts you to shooting 4K APV log at 60 frames per second and 8K at 30 frames per second. But you can actually shoot 4K APV log at 120 frames per second. And to do that, you need to go into Pro Video mode, and now you're going to find the option is available. When you enable APV in video settings, you're going to notice your color space options change. So if you tap on the APV toggle, this is going to open up color space options. So here you can choose between HDR or log and APV 422HQ or 422LQ. So HQ is obviously high quality, LQ is low quality, and that essentially means higher or lower bitrate and higher or lower file sizes. So if you really want the best top quality, then choose HQ, as long as you don't mind these massive file sizes. But if you want to compromise between quality and file size, then you can choose the LQ setting. So like I say, you can't shoot Rec 709 in the APV codec. And this actually makes sense if you think about what APV is for, because it's a professional visually lossless codec and it's designed for post-production workflows. Whereas Rec 709 is a delivery format and it's really meant for, the finished product. So APV is essentially for greater flexibility when grading. And for most filmmaking work, log is the format that you want to choose here, because this gives you the flattest image with the most dynamic range and again, more flexibility in post. And if you pair it with the HQ setting, you're going to have the best quality footage the S26 Ultra can produce. Only choose HDR with the APV codec if you're delivering specifically for HDR screens, which we've already talked about, and you want the phone to handle the tone mapping for you. If you just want to shoot standard video without thinking about grading, then just switch back to the HEVC and use Rec 709. So if you shot a clip in APV, but you decide that you want the smaller HEVC codec, then you can easily just convert the clip within the Samsung device. So just open the gallery app and find your APV clip, tap the three dots, and you'll see an option that says convert from APV to HEVC. So you just tap that, and then it's going to create a new HEVC version of the clip. So that's going to be a copy, and your original APV file is going to stay untouched. But of course, there is going to be a quality reduction because it's got to compress your video down to this much smaller file size. As well, if you shot the clip in log, the file is going to remain in log after the conversion, so you're going to still keep your log profile there. So if you have an HDR clip and you want to convert it to regular SDR, just open the clip, tap those three dots again, and then just select Convert HDR to SDR. And the phone is going to create a new Rec 709 file, and it's going to leave your original HDR clip untouched. So again, you're going to get a copy, and because the thing is that Rec 709 is basically supported by all platforms and screens, so you're going to be safe. When you shoot in Samsung Log, the footage looks flat. And that's because using this flat footage captures as much dynamic range as possible, but it can make it hard to judge exposure and color while you're actually filming. And that's what the LUT preview is for. So it's going to overlay a color correction on your screen in real time so that you get a better idea of what the finished image is going to look like. And the important thing is that it's only a preview, so the file that gets recorded is still your original flat log footage, and the LUT is not going to be baked in. Back in the main camera UI, once you've selected APV and log, you're now going to get a LUT button. So if you tap that, you're going to open up your LUT options. So we've got standard, and that just maps the footage to Rec 709 so the colors look standard. And this is obviously the most useful option for just checking that your exposure is correct while you're shooting. And then we've got these 4 cinematic LUT styles. So Blockbuster is going to give you a sort of orange and teal look that you'll maybe recognize from the Hollywood films. We've got high contrast and a pretty cinematic feel. We've got coming of age, which is softer, and it's more of a calm pastel tones and low contrast. The kind of look that you might see in K-pop videos or indie coming-of-age films. And we've got romance, which is warm and soft, and this is kind of good for emotional scenes maybe, but you can just use it for whatever you want. It's just to give you an idea. Maybe something more reflective, you want something more of a subtle look. And then we've got thriller, which is kind of the opposite to the romance. It pulls down the colors, and it pushes up the contrast. So you've got that kind of dark, gritty look that you see in thrillers quite often. So just pick whichever one gives you the rough sense of the grade that you're looking for. And then in post, you're going to start from the clean log footage and you're going to build your grade from there. So these are some clips that I shot in Samsung Log in the APV format, and I imported into DaVinci Resolve. And you can actually download Samsung's official conversion LUTs. So, the same ones that we just saw that you can use as preview LUTs in the main Samsung app. You can actually download these from the Samsung website. And I'll put a link in the description to direct you to the page where you can download them. So you will need to create a developer account to access them, but it's just a few clicks and it takes about 2 minutes. The only difference is that they're going to come in this zip, and then you're going to find that there's actually 12 LUTs. And that's because there are 3 versions of each style, so you can play around with those. So for example, we've got the Blockbuster neutral version, and then we've got Strong 1 and Strong 2. So we've got different levels of this LUT that you can choose how strong you want it to be, and the others have different strengths as well. So once I've imported these LUTs into DaVinci Resolve, I can now apply them and maybe add a few little tweaks just to adjust it to my taste. The thing is that once you've added a creative LUT like this, you don't really want to adjust the color too much. But if you do want like complete control and you really want to create your own look, then I would just work from the basic file without using any LUTs. Now, Horizon Lock is actually a new feature on the S26 Ultra, which keeps the horizon level while recording video, even if you turn your camera the full 360 degrees. And if you've used an action camera, then you'll probably be familiar with this kind of feature. To enable it, just make sure you're in video mode, and then at the side of the screen, you'll see the stabilization icon. It looks like a small figure walking, so you just tap that, and then you'll get the 2 stabilization options. So we've got the good old super steady mode, and now we've got the new horizon lock mode. So if we select horizon lock, and you can now see that as you rotate the phone, it actually keeps the horizon level. But for it to work fully, so that you get the full 360 degrees, you actually need to be recording video. So tap record, and now as you rotate the phone, the horizon line stays completely fixed. And when you watch this video back, you're going to see that the horizon remains perfectly level. So it's not just for small tilts. As I say, you can rotate the phone a full 360 degrees, and the horizon is going to stay locked throughout. But obviously it's going to be useful for handheld walking shots, or basically anything where keeping a level horizon is important, but you don't want to, carry a gimbal. So I don't think it's going to replace a physical gimbal for everything. There's quite a few different shots that you can't really do just holding the phone in your hands that you can do with the gimbal. Things like crane shots and stuff. Now the downside is that it is going to crop into the sensor, so you're not going to get the full field of view. So I had a look at the Blackmagic camera app on the S26 Ultra, and the first thing that I noticed was that there's a new shutter and ISO priority feature. And this means that you can lock ISO and then have the shutter on auto, or vice versa. You can have the shutter locked and the ISO on auto. So to access it, you just tap the exposure button, and now you can see that you have the old EV slider as before. And next to it, you can choose between 3 settings: shutter and ISO auto, just shutter auto, or just ISO auto. And actually, by the way, you can also do this in the native Pro video mode on your Samsung, so you don't need to use the Blackmagic camera to do it. You could just simply set your ISO or shutter to auto and then switch the other one to manual. You can select the new APV codec as well as the Samsung Log, and neither of those are available in the S24 Ultra version, even though Log is available using Samsung's Pro mode on the S24 Ultra. Another thing that I noticed was that I wasn't able to export the LUTs from the Blackmagic app on either of my Samsung devices, which is something that you can do with an iPhone pretty easily. So if you go into the LUT manager and then scroll down and click export, there's actually no option to save internally we're using. And so that just means that you can only use these LUTs for preview, or you can bake them in when you're shooting, but you can't export them and then add them later as you can if you shot with an iPhone. So I thought you might be interested in the Samsung mics, the quality of them, and so I'm using them now, the inbuilt mics, and also I'll try using the Samsung noise reduction feature and you can see if that improves things. There's probably a little bit of a breeze. There's also some work going on, so there is some noise here. So if you want to improve your skills with videography with your smartphone or any other mobile camera, or any camera to be honest, I've built up a load of materials that you can use. So we've got books. There's like 4 books for smartphone videography on Amazon, and there's tons of lessons which I've got over on Patreon, and I'm going to link everything down in the description so that you can have a look. I've got like from real beginner sort of stuff. One of my favorite courses is actually one which helps you to create a sequence that has a kind of meaning to it. So you're not just like slamming together shot or sort of meaningless shots. How to create a sequence so that it goes from one shot to the next. But that's it for this video, and thank you to everyone who purchased the Blackmagic camera app book, which is doing really well on Amazon. It's been #1 on Amazon for a bit. So thank you to everybody, and thank you to all the Patreons who keep this channel running, and to everybody who's bought any of the books or any of the other stuff. And that's it from me, and I'll see you in the next one.